investing her time is in abolitionists, speaking to a variety of audiences about modern day slavery. She also works with Annie Schomaker.
There you go.
Yes. And together they're working as part of the Bond County Task Force. And part of that is they're working to operate a aftercare shelter called Eden's Glory, which is something she's going to be talking to you all about today. Before she gets started, I'd like to present you with this mug of gifts as a thank you for coming to our conference on behalf of the university and the Spring Arbor Coalition.
Beautiful, beautifully done. Thank you, Helen. All right. As she said, all of those things are true. I'm Ginger Coakley, and am pleased to be here with you guys today, you ladies and gentlemen here today. So, well, my story starts on a Christian campus, and I've been fighting trafficking for about 4 years. I was working on a Christian college campus, similar to but much smaller than Spring Arbor. And they decided to do a whole week on a social justice issue and chose human trafficking, the students I was working with. And I said, well, that's fabulous, we'll do it, but I don't know anything about human trafficking. So I went on this research and learning journey, and my heart absolutely broke from the statistics that I couldn't believe were reality to the narratives and stories that I was reading. Absolutely horrific, the realities of human trafficking. And then for it to be located near me was even more surprising. So I already knew that my life was changing. I already knew that I was getting married, leaving the state that I was in, and I didn't know what next steps were other than getting married and moving. And so the gentleman that came to campus is Kevin Austin, who's the director of the Set Free movement, and he came to share with us. And at the end of it, I said, I have to get involved. How do I do it? And so the Set Free movement is champions holistic freedom, seeks to create new futures for those vulnerable and those who have been enslaved. And we proclaim Christ through the whole of that. We want to end slavery. We want to create new futures. And it starts by looking into the eyes of these children. How can you not look into their eyes and just fall in love with them? They're absolutely beautiful. They're made in the image of God. And how can we not do something in response? At least that's what my heart was screaming. Because at the same time, I was reading the scriptures that tell us to take care of the poor, the widow, the orphan. They told us to take care, feed, clothe, care for the stranger. And all the statistics and the stories that I read about human trafficking said that these kids, the slave in our world, is the stranger who we're supposed to take care of. And so I leapt into action. Already someone who was in ministry, I found a calling that I hadn't found before. And so the journey, what I want to communicate to you is that the journey becomes a calling, and that everybody's journey is going to land somewhere different. God's going to take care of his world. He's going to build his kingdom. And for me, it landed in the particular spot of caring about and doing something about human trafficking. For you, you're here, maybe that's what you're called to as well. But just seek the Lord in whatever that journey is. So here's the strategy that we kind of ran into in the community that I landed in Greenville, Illinois. So some of you might have heard of Greenville College, sister school to Spring Arbor. And my community knew nothing about trafficking when I landed there. And one of our strategies is to say, look deeply at your community, know what's going on, understand the realities, kind of similar to what Andy was saying this morning. If you were at that first keynote, just look around you and understand. My community didn't understand trafficking, but my community does understand how to fight injustices because they're doing some incredible things. There's a remarkable network for the poverty, for the kids who are vulnerable. They're taking care of the poor, and it just fits right into our heartbeat of addressing the issues in the community. So what I found, in addition to finding justice fighters in my community, was a broken community. And so we started to rally all the people who are influencers of community, because something we also believe is that community can be shifted and changed. It's permeable. It can be healed, it can be restored, because it's changed once to be broken, it can be changed again and be healed. And so we just started to pursue that. And so one of my claims, you maybe came here to talk about aftercare, about a restoration home. But one thing that I absolutely know is that to do aftercare, you've got to engage your community. You've got to know what's happening. You've got to rally around, get them rallied around you, around a cause, and find a purpose. So we gathered people from around the community. This is our task force. Some of them, there's a few more in addition to who are in that picture. And I wish I had time today to tell you each of their stories, because they're not just a group of people who are joining a task force to fight a cause in the way that our task force fights the cause. They've figured out a way to fight injustices in their everyday lives in their own unique ways, for their own giftings, their own callings. So, but I'll just tell you who they are and their profession. I wish I could tell you their stories. They're all incredible. But on the left is Donna, so I'll go left to right. Donna is a school teacher, and then there's Annie, who I wish Annie could have been here today. We are yes people, and so any invitation we get, we try to meet. She had two different opportunities in addition to being here, so she's doing those two. I'm doing this. Annie's a social worker. She had a great job as a social worker at the hospital in our town, but she felt called to do something about trafficking. So she quit her job and came to work for us for no money. And it's just amazing what the Lord has led us to. So that's a piece of her story. Then we have Lorna, who's a social media. She'd be the one running the camera. I mean, she's amazing what she can do. She's got us figured out in terms of Facebook and messaging and all that. She keeps us in line. And she also has a great passion about the labor side of it. And so if you want to know about a supply chain, if you want to know about what product to buy or not buy or how to engage, she's who I send you to. And then myself, and then a man named Kyle. He is a community member. He's involved in city council. He works a day job at a local factory, but he has made waves in our community because of his heart about this. And then on the far right is Anne. She is a nurse practitioner. So you can see we've got a sampling of the different sectors of society, different skill sets. And so through them and a few others, we can go into the community and have a wide reach. And that's really important, to have a good sampling of the community, so you're not looking through one lens of learning or one lens of expertise, but you've got a wide variety and you're connected pretty far. Make sense? Any questions? Okay. And so our team has, so the other diagram was strategy. This is our approach. So when the director of the Set Free movement put this diagram in front of a workshop I watched him lead 2 years ago, I said, my team's already done this like 3 times. But so it was just helpful to say in terms of this is what we do, this is how we start, and we start down here with prayer. So our team gathers and prays before every meeting. We also have Monday mornings at a local coffee shop that we pray, and we're praying forward our community. We're praying forward our hearts about justice. We're asking questions, and we're praying specifically for things that we think God is telling us to do. We just are asking specifics. So, but at the very beginning, we were just praying. We were like, Lord, help. Like, what do we do here? What does this community need? And through that, we started asking questions of people we were connected to. We started asking what's happening in the community, what's not happening in the community, what are needs, what are met needs and unmet needs. And just getting to know our community. A couple of us are transplants into Greenville, so we didn't grow up there. We haven't lived there for very many years. We had a lot to learn. And then as we did that, we started to build a network and to dialogue with individuals who were stakeholders in the community, who knew what was going on, who were lifers, and could tell us the scene. And once we gathered that information, had a network, we could then start to have the conversation about what do we do. So we went through this long process of learning, and then we started to have like, okay, this is what we do. And then, this is more of a circle than a square, because you just keep going. You never get to an end point, right? You just keep doing this. So each time we would have something that we do or a solution, you then travel around and you find out something new and you meet somebody else and then it comes up with a new strategy. So we've been around this diagram probably 5 or 6 times in my 4 years of engaging in this work in our community. And every time it surprises us the things that God has us do. So if you came here, these other things, there's so much here to talk about. We could talk all day just on this, but you came here to talk about Aftercare. Well, in our 5th or 6th trip around this process, we got presented with the idea of opening a safe home, a place for women to come and be, trafficking survivors. We didn't know at that point that it would be women, but for survivors to come and to be restored, to heal, to learn, and to be able to integrate back into society, into healthy and full lives. And our team, simultaneously, our hearts were melted and warmed and moved, and our boots trembled. I mean, it was truly a move into this with fear and trembling, but affirmation that God's asking us to do this. So with that unanimous response, Annie and I, who are the 2 full-time persons in our community working on this, just started to explore. So we went on about a 2.5-month exploration and learning and tour. And so we started to learn, we traveled around this map again. And so that is where we've landed currently. That's my one team in Greenville, Illinois. The Set Free Movement has about 30 teams around the country, and those teams do something different. Each one of them does something different. And so with community engagement, the need of the community is going to be different. The response of the community is going to be different. And so you might dump out at a different place. The Lord might say, no, I don't want you to do aftercare. I want you to do education in schools, or maybe you need to do preventative measures with youth or something. I don't know where God would land you, but He's landed us in a place where this is what our journey has looked like. So, and I just put this up there. I don't expect you to read this. The writing's too small. But it's just a timeline chart of things that we've done. So we work for 4 constructs: awareness, telling the story, just getting the word out that trafficking exists; prevention, what can we do to keep persons from being vulnerable? What can we do to keep them from getting wrapped into a trafficking situation? If we identify a victim, let's rescue them. And then restoration, what we're doing with Eden's Glory, the home that we are opening. But you can see just with, maybe you can catch the colors because they're connected to those things, but we've done a variety of all of those things all along. Rescue and restoration isn't something to jump into lightly or quickly, but with clear direction from the Lord. But it's a journey. That's what I just want to communicate. Like, this takes time. You can't start out and say, we're going to open a home in a community. You got to do these other things. You got to tell them the story about why. Why is a home necessary? You got to do this hard work, and it takes time. So I know myself, I get eager, and I'm like, let's just jump in, But the important thing is really to scale back. Do the hard work of the community, collaborating, networking, educating, and so on. Any questions so far? No? Okay. I want to go into a time of really getting into what our process has been for opening the home itself. So Eden's Glory is a home for survivors of trafficking, and we want to see them restored, and we want to do it because we praise and honor God. God is our motivator. God is the reason that we know freedom, and Jesus is the giver of freedom. And so that's our orientation. So this program is a 2-year program that we intend to invite women, adult women to. And all along the way, we have been met with successes and challenges. And so we're just going to bounce back and forth between some success stories, some challenge stories. Through that, I hope you'll glean something that will be helpful to you in your journey, whether your end goal is aftercare or it's something else. But it's our story, and it's a story. It's not the way it's always going to go, but hopefully there'll be some helpful things in the storytelling for you guys.
Quick question,
Yeah.
these are for adult women,
Mhm.
do you have age parameters there?
We don't, just 18 and older at this point. We anticipate that it could be a wide range, just depending on who's coming out. Some of that story will come out as we go. So the first success that we experienced is prayer. That's where we start on that journey, that chart. But I got to tell you, when we pray, God moves. And so when we pray, our heart gets shaped into God's heart. And as we're changed, a community is changed. And that all happens through prayer. So I can't stress the importance of that foundation. And as a byproduct, it tells you we meet on Mondays. Well, it's amazing the things that happen on Mondays in our workday that are coincidences or milestones, but we always call them miracles or answers to prayer because they've been things that we've specifically prayed. So one indicator of that, or one example of that, just this last Monday, we have applied for a 501c3, so it could be a nonprofit, tax-deductible organization. Well, we were told, we submitted it in June, and we got a piece of paperwork that basically said you're not going to hear anything more from us, the federal government, IRS, until December. Well, last Monday it came through. And the miracle thing for us about that is not just that it came through early, but it came through right in time for us to be able to send out these investment and partnership packets that we're ready to send out. Those are in the final stages, and we wanted to put on that, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and it's just in time. I mean, these things are just in time. The naming of Eden's Glory, we'd agonized, we'd had hundreds of ideas. There's this thing in Illinois where you have to go and affirm a name through a name database in order to make it a business. And we had been through, I don't know how many dozens of names, of ideas that we thought, this is the name God gave us. And we'd go, no, it's not a name, that can't be the name of your business. We were a week away from launching to the community that this home was coming about. And we needed a name. I mean, it just is much better to, instead of saying, we have an Aftercare program for survivors, it's better to, like, Eden's Glory is the name of our program. And finally, through prayer on a Monday morning, out came Eden's Glory. And it just clicked with us. It made sense. So I went to the name database, no name, Eden Glory, you can have that. And we're like, yes, But it was the Monday before the Sunday that we were launching this thing in church. So those are just two stories. It's just prayer works, and it's just in time for when we need what we need to do God's work. A challenge is communication. So we're super busy. Like I said, we're yes people. We invite any invitation that we get, we want to say yes to and go to. So we're busy. We're preparing presentations. We're doing stuff in the community. We're having meetings and da-da-da-da. We're busy. And so there's so much going on and so much story to tell that it's hard to tell the story, because who has time to write a newsletter or an email or, like even for us for a while, like even post something on Facebook. We just didn't feel like we had time. And so it's a real challenge, even for us. We're getting better. We've got our Facebook that we're updating regularly and things, but we probably need a monthly newsletter, but about all we're getting right now is a quarterly newsletter out. And so, it's a challenge, because the story is important and the story is compelling, and we need to do that better. It's a challenge. A success is community stakeholders. We've been invited to be a part of many groups, so like the Ministerial Alliance. I'm ordained and this is my appointed ministry, so I have invitation to go to the Ministerial Alliance. There's also interagency meetings that your community probably has, where service providers and other folks gather. Ours is quarterly. Sometimes some counties are monthly. And so we have met so many people who are key people in the community who know us just out of relationship and attendance of these things. And through that, they've learned the story of trafficking. They've embraced the need to do something about it, and they're really excited now that we have told them about Eden's Glory, because They're like, we know you, we love you, and we can't believe that you're going after this thing, and it's such a need. And so that's been a success. Complementary challenge is community stakeholders. So there are individuals in the community who say human trafficking doesn't exist here. Our community is 7,000 people, and they don't often understand what human trafficking looks like because they haven't come to one of our trainings or we haven't been invited into a relationship with them. And so we find that some community stakeholders, law enforcement, some of the higher government officials, city officials, are harder to enter relationship with sometimes. In our community, we're working very diligently on that, but they're a challenge. And so we just continue to press in and to lean in. I just encourage you, when you reach a challenge, press in, because eventually it'll become a success story. So Annie meets regularly with one of our police officers who slowly but surely her heart's changing about this issue, and she's starting to integrate it and have conversations with her co-worker officers. And so, I mean, that's a slow, but it's getting closer to being a success rather than a challenge, as example. Funding. One of the success stories of funding is these scarves. We, before we really had taken on the idea of opening a house, we were looking for ways to just raise money for the movement. And somebody gave me a scarf, much like this one, and said, hey, I just want you to have a scarf. We made it with my mom's group. Why don't you just try it? I said, that's pretty cool. So I wore it a couple times and got some compliments on it. People were like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I was like, yeah, my friend made it. So it was just kind of a fun little thing. Well, one day, God said to me, why don't you make those and sell them? And I said, I wonder if that would work. If God's saying it, let's try it. So we made it. I made some changes a little bit. We wanted to have some meaning behind it, and so we kind of said, okay, each one of them is going to have 7 strands. I think the one my friend gave me had 5. I said, let's make 7. 7 is the number of completeness, wholeness. That's kind of something we're pursuing, and for the community, it's something we're pursuing for individuals. So 7. Well, in addition to 7 strands, let's make 7 knots. So we did that, and I said, well, let's make it a little more meaningful and add something to it. So we gave, along with that, 7 ways to pray, 7 ways to be an abolitionist. And we sell them for $7, suggested donation of $7. And we had no idea if it would work. I mean, like literally, I had no idea. So I went to, I think it was a women's conference, was the first place that we put these on a table and said, what do you think? They flew off our tables. I mean, absolutely flew off our tables. I was so surprised. And so we just kept making them. And they've become a multi-benefit piece. It's not just for money for the movement, but when you wear it, somebody says, that's a cool scarf, and then you get to tell the story. Well, actually, it's a freedom scarf, and did you know about human trafficking? So then you're spreading the story as you wear it. It has, we've had youth groups help us make these, and so it's an opportunity to have a relationship with kids in the community. We get to tell the story, we get to do some prevention work, and I mean, it just keeps giving. Like, it's one idea that God just planted in my head that just keeps giving, right? So this is a success story about funding, just finding something that has multiple levels of engagement and makes some money for the movement at the same time. And it's actually our biggest moneymaker at this point in terms of opening Eden's Glory. So all the money is, all the shirts they're made from recycled t-shirts. So we cut them up, turn them into scarves, and it's 100% profit because the shirts are donated. A local church lets us print the cards. We don't have any money invested in them. We just sell them, and it's totally profit. So they've been our biggest money maker so far. Next to that challenge is funding. It's really expensive to run a home. You have to pay your employees, and you have to keep the lights on, and you have to pay for insurance. And these women aren't going to have any money. So what about their medical costs and cares, and I mean, anything you can think of that it requires for you to live and a building to function and a program to run, it adds up. So funding is actually the one thing that's keeping us from opening our doors, because it's only been about 1.5 years since vision to now. We have a home that's pretty much ready for occupancy. which the story of acquiring that space is just as much of a Miracle Monday God story as any of them. But anyway, so year and a half into this journey, and we have a home that's ready for occupancy, but doors that we can't open because we're asking for people and churches and businesses to get behind it, and it just hasn't come yet. So we're throwing out that investment packet, partnership packet, and we're hoping to have a great return, year-end gifts. You know, we're praying. God has pushed this forward. We know it'll happen, but the money part of it is a challenge for sure. Any questions so far?
What's the, how many women are you going to be able to house, and what's your estimated cost?
Sure. Total budget for a month with all expenses, employee, everything. We're looking at around $15,000, and we intend on having 4 women. So the home is 3 bedrooms. 2 rooms will be for the women with bunk beds. The other room will be for a house manager. So 4 women initially, and we've got phase 2 and 3 and 4. You know, bigger building. Eventually open a program for minors, that kind of thing. Good. Storytelling opportunities. Again, we're yes people. We'll go and take the story anywhere that we're invited, and so we feel like we've had lots of opportunity to get in front of people and tell the story. And I think that's been really important, and why we've spread so quickly is because of that. And the fact that this time last year we had 10 set-free movement teams, and now we have the 30 that you saw on the map, is a huge testament of just the success of having an opportunity to tell a story. This is something that people are hungry to hear about. Almost every group that we go to talk to refers us to somebody else, and we get a phone call. Sometimes it's a year later, and they say, you know, the Salvation Army folks called us and told us that we needed to hear you speak. You know, I mean, just the referrals keep going. So that's been a real success. Challenge next to that, when we tell the story, people want numbers. I wish we had something like Michigan where, you know, Andy spoke this morning and said, we've got numbers, we know where things are happening in which county, and I wish that Illinois had that kind of number reporting system and research, because we don't have it. I mean, we work closely with the assistant to the United States attorney, and she is tasked to fight human trafficking and to prosecute traffickers and speak on behalf of victims, and she doesn't have numbers. And I'm like, come on, Illinois, so it's a challenge, because how can we say we're opening a home when there's no clear Illinois numbers that there's a need for the home, right? Some of that is because laws in Illinois and prosecution, losing my words, penalties for prosecuting are higher for things like abuse or domestic violence than they are for a trafficking law. So something that might be a trafficking situation is going to be prosecuted as something different because the penalty is stronger, right? So our laws need to balance out with the criminal act that's involved. So that's some of the challenges, just really having that research, understanding clear numbers and the issues. Learning and collaboration, I've talked about this a little bit already with our ability to connect with Ministerial Alliance and other stakeholders in the community, and just really start to learn from them about the community and for us to teach them about the community. Another great thing is that this environment or this industry, if you will, of fighting human trafficking is very collaborative. We've talked with many safe homes, we've talked with many task forces, we've talked with many coalitions who are doing this. Everybody's sharing information. Everybody's like, how can I help you? What do you need? What can we do? What can we give you? Not necessarily money, but resources like policy, procedure, documents and information is just really fluid. Everybody's like, here, take my stuff, don't recreate the wheel. That's an incredible gift in this movement against trafficking, because you don't find that. You know, you go and start talking about domestic violence, and then they suddenly think, well, you're trying to take our money, so we're not going to give you anything because we've got the market on what we do, and we don't want you to have what we do. And the human trafficking field is not like that. And I think because it's wide open. I mean, there's such a need. It's vast. It's new. Everybody's trying to help each other, and it's really incredible, really incredible. Challenges that we've have found with opening the home in Illinois, for some reason, maybe the reason is because there's only currently 8 beds available to human trafficking victims in the state. We'll add 4 to that, but that might be the reason, but there's no licensing agency for us. In all of our statewide task force and all of our collaborating, we have not been able to find someone who says, this is the protocol for opening a home. And so we're reaching far and wide, and we have gleaned a lot from other homes, but they're all from different states. The 8-bed, we've talked with the persons from the 8 beds in Illinois, and they've been great, but they're like, yeah, there's nobody telling us what to do or what not to do, so we're just figuring it out. And we're like, oh no, we don't want to just figure it out, because sometimes somebody's going to come along and say, no, you can't do that. So we're pressing and leaning hard into that challenge of saying, what are the best practices? And we're asking, and we're praying, and we're researching, and we're learning. And we've talked to a couple of survivors as well, saying, what do you need? What's an effective program for you? What was the best thing in your recovery? But it's a challenge because those practices aren't established yet. Success, I think, is that we found in the cultural mindset of our community and some others that we've spoken with, is that there's an openness to learn. There's an openness to adapt to a new way of thinking. We really have seen our community shift. So when we were first getting started as a group raising awareness, we would go and we would just hang posters because we're showing a movie for free, come have a conversation with us. We'd go around and put movie posters up, and the people whose shops we would put them up at would be like, what's this about? What's trafficking? Modern slavery? I don't understand. And those were the things that we got, that first walk around hanging signs. The second time, they said, oh yeah, we kind of remember you. What are you doing? And then, I don't know, we've done that 4, 5, 6 times for different events, or just providing education information to them. Because once they were like, what's going on? We said, oh, we need to tell you. So here's some material. And so this last time that we went around, I can't remember exactly which thing it was for, but they said, we know who you are, and we've responded, and we've done this, and we've done this, and we're so glad you're doing what you're doing, and we're so glad you're in our community. And so now, when there was skepticism, now there's embrace. And I mean, that's a huge success in the shift of our community and cultural mindset around this issue. The challenge is the cultural mindset. So, for instance, one story that is related to us going around town and talking to people, providing education materials, is a peddler came through town. She was selling jewelry, and she was a Thai girl, and it was a 110-degree day a couple of summers ago. She had long sweatshirt on, long jeans on, and her story just didn't add up. Nobody that she talked to remembered her name or the organization that she was selling jewelry for, and it just was a messy situation. So we started conversation with the people in the community. We weren't able to help her because word got to us about her a little too late, but we started talking to people in the community. That was our response, is to just do some education. And so some people were open, like, oh my goodness, I could never have thought that maybe she needed help. And so that's a challenge. Another challenge is that the police department, we said, what do you do? Like, if we had gotten a hold of her, could we have called you? How would you have responded as law enforcement to this issue? And they said, oh, we probably would have just picked her up and taken her out of town because we don't really want those people in our community. And that's a hard thing to hear. Like, that's kind of ugly, right? Somebody who might need help, let's just send them on. We don't want those people. I mean, that's really closed. And so in the midst of a community that's doing great things, you also have calloused people who just don't care. And how do we shift a culture to care? How do we change the practices of law enforcement and others to engage continues to be challenges that we have to lean into, and that we will have to lean into, because we're going to need the police department behind us full force, and the sheriff's department behind us full force when we have women in the home. We're not anticipating large security risks, but we know that there might be some, and we need them on our side, So it's a challenge to lean into. I think volunteers we've been wildly successful with. Our task force has many things that we do, and we have a lot of people we can call on. And sometimes it's just a simple invitation with a specific request, and people are like, yep, I can do that. So they may not be able to commit many hours, but we've learned to ask specifically. And that's something that you can do easily, is just say, I need this thing. I know this person can do this thing. I'm going to ask specifically, rather than like a broad call for invitation of come and hang out with us and help us with this work. People get really involved when we can say, I know you're gifted in this. I appreciate that gift. Can you help us with that gift in what we're doing? And people really appreciate an acknowledgement of who they are and respond well. So one of the challenges connected to volunteers is involvement from men. Just like in this room, we're mostly women. Men being involved in the conversation is rare, and I'm so thankful for you, and you're listening, you're absorbing, and think deeply, and then tell me about how we can invite you to be a part of things. It's a really challenging issue for men to say, I'm going to do something. They have to confront themselves, and they have to confront their brother or their friend, and deal with some of the causes. We talk about the demand issue in this fight a lot, and so inviting men to dialogue about that amongst each other is challenging. So I'm very interested. Please take my card, tell me how I can invite men and what I can ask them to do, because in opening a home, we're going to need to show women that men are good, and we're going to need to invite men to be a part of their healing process. But how do we do that in healthy ways? So we're praying deeply, we're researching deeply, we're talking with people. I want my husband to be involved in my work and ministry, but what does that look like when it's with women who have been deeply wounded? And men are primarily the wounders. How do we do that? It's a challenge, something to think through. So that's the end of this slide. Do we have any questions, thoughts, rebuttals? You know what? We have a grant writer who is digging and digging and searching and digging. And if we talk specifically about looking for human trafficking grants, they're really not out there. I don't know if it's a new issue or if it's just something that we don't want to talk about or acknowledge in our society. So we're trying to get creative. So programs that we want to have within the home, are there grants for that? So gardening, agriculture, curriculum, GED. We're trying to get creative with the grants that we search for. It's also a challenge because we're faith-based, and a lot of those foundations that are putting out money see that and immediately turn away. And so we're trying to get creative with that too. Maybe they can fund our grocery budget, and so maybe we have set meal times from 5 to 6. We're going to eat. Well, we're going to pray at 4:49. We're can we get creative within some of the bounds that some of those grants might put on us? I don't know. It's a good question though. We're searching for sure. Good. Any other questions? Thoughts? Rebuttals? Mm-hmm. Yep. So we envisioned the first year of their stay to be addressing the emotional, the spiritual, the physical issues that they're going to come in with. It's going to take up time and process. So that's going to be our emphasis on that first year of their time. The second year of their time will transition, and it'll be a different transition point for each woman because the healing process takes a different amount of time. But so the second half, essentially, of their time will be assessing, do they need to learn to read? Let's get a literacy coach in there. Do they need their GED? Let's get them through the GED process. Maybe they have their high school education and some work history. Let's maybe take them to the community college, get some classes in their belt. Let's do some typing, computer kind of skills where they're starting to get some of that job piece. So it's really going to be tailored to what each woman needs, but we're certainly planning in that direction. And there will also be other, maybe they want to go into something vocational, so they want to do hair or woodworking or engineer, electricity or something that is more specified. We'll figure that avenue out for them. We want to offer a bunch of different things to expose to ourselves and to them what their passion is, what God's created them to do, what their gifts are. Good. Any others? Okay. This slide is about consideration. So if and when God leads you to doing aftercare, these are some things to think about, some considerations. And some of this has already been exposed in the conversation, so we'll just throw them up there. If we need to talk about them, we'll talk about them. If not, we'll move on. One of the first things we kind of worked through is what population do we want to serve? We want to serve girls, boys, men, women, minors, adults, who? And that's a question that you have to answer. We landed with, like I said, adult women at this point. A location. Typically this is something that needs to have some privacy, some security. Everybody in town doesn't need to know where the location is. So are you in a big city where if you acquire a house in a neighborhood, nobody's really going to know, and it's no big deal that you're in a highly populated area? Or are you in a small town like I am, where if you grabbed a house that's in town, in a neighborhood, everybody's going to know that that's the house, that's Eden's Glory, right? So we ended up choosing a location outside of town. Hopefully that provides quite a bit of that buffer for the gossip of a small town. Privacy is another issue. We're very serious about the fact that we don't put the address in print. We do not give people directions to where the place is. If we have volunteers come out, like we've been working on the house, painting, remodeling, all kinds of stuff all summer. And so we had work days. We advertised the work day, and then we had a meeting location, and then we had them sign this privacy agreement, like you will not take pictures, you will not post on Facebook that you've been here, you'll turn your location device off on your phone. I mean, just really trying to secure any way for that location to get out. You won't tell people, you won't bring people here without permission, that kind of thing. We're very serious about that and require that before they ever get to where the location is. So then we carpool, lead them out there. Yeah, right now, Annie and I office out of our homes, but when the house opens, we will have office space. So we're in negotiation about that. So we do have office space. All files and things will be housed in that office. The initial intake with the woman, the conversation about this is what we expect from you kind of stuff will be held at the office and not on site. Good question. Good. Longevity. This is something that our hearts are moved about, and how we jump into something like aftercare requires longevity. So we've been on this journey for 1.5 years. That's not for the faint of heart. Just getting to many of the places that we're at is it requires a stick-to-itedness and I'm going to be in this for the long haul. To see a program develop well, you got to 5, 10, you got to be in it. So really consider who's in the conversation with you, what kind of stick-to-itedness do those persons have, and that's really something that's got to be there. So one example, of that is when this idea came to us, Annie's a social worker, and I knew she'd be the brains behind the operation. I'm more of the like details, logistics, but Annie would, she'd really be running the program. She's a social worker. She's got the training. And her husband's a football coach. Her husband was only hired, he was on a 1-year kind of interim position at that point as a football coach. And I said, Annie, we can dream this forward, but I need to know. I need to know that your husband is hired for another couple years at least, so that I know you're going to be here and that we press in and move towards this. Because at that point she wasn't a paid person. Now she's an employee of Eden's Glory, but so I just need to know that her family was going to be around. That's really important. Collaborative network. All the hard work that we did in our community surrounded us with a lot of people who will be a part of the story of operating Eden's Glory. So from our health department, who's going to help us get the insurance that the women need. They'll be on Medicare. That's what it is for the younger, right? Not the seniors. I always get it backwards. But anyways, they'll be on Medicare, and our health department's going to help us do that. All the way to doctors' offices. Who is it that's going to be handling the medical care of these women and be sensitive to that? All of the work we did over the last several years has just really put us in a good place to have that collaborative network around us. That's why I say we've got to do the community engagement before we do anything else. Professional infrastructure and timing. This goes right along with, is Annie, the social worker, going to be around for a while? And who are we training up to be the next person in line? Because Annie might not always be around. It might be some kind of tragic accident. It might be that her husband's really got to take a job somewhere else and she's going with them. I don't know. It could be anything. Maybe I'm not around. Who am I building up to replace me? And so what kind of infrastructure do we have to support that it's not just Annie and I's project, but it's really is the community's project that has sustainability beyond us. Laws. We need to know the laws, and that's something that we are always learning more about. But what are the requirements of a home? It goes back to that licensing piece as well. What's really required of an aftercare facility, knowing those really well. What are the needs of the demographics? So how is a human trafficking survivor different than a domestic violence survivor? They're similar. They've got some crossover issues, but really, what is the needs of the demographic of a trafficking survivor, and what do we need to meet? Really consider that deeply and explore that deeply. The structure and approach. So you asked me some questions about, when are we going to do vocational type things with the women, and you got to look at the structure of your full program, but even down to the structure of a day, because these women are used to being up at night, having all kinds of time, and if we give them too much time, then these emotions might flood out that they don't know how to handle, and maybe they're going to run. Well, we need to consider the structure of a day that's going to be a healthy rhythm, keeps them busy and engaged, but allows them the space to also heal. Sustainability, that's something that we are always asking. How are we going to sustain this? With a $15,000 a month budget, how in the world are we going to do this? And so one of the questions, and one of the kind of industry best practices with aftercare programs is alongside it having a social enterprise. And that is a business that is profitable, that feeds back into paying for the costs of the program. And so consider how you're going to move into sustainability. And we are praying and praying and praying about what that social enterprise looks like for us. We have a few ideas, a few possibilities. We have other people that keep feeding us possibilities, and we're just praying like, Lord, which one? Which one can we do? Which one will thrive in our community, will make us good neighbors in our community, that we're not stealing somebody else's business. We could open a fair trade coffee shop, but that's going to hurt our friend Jess, those kinds of things. How do we move towards sustainability? Prosecution. Are we willing to move through prosecution with the women? Is that something that we mandate, or is that something that we invite? Who's going to go through that process with the women? We're not lawyers, so we need someone who's well experienced in human trafficking prosecution to come alongside and say, we're going to do that. You got to figure that out. When is it appropriate to institute that into the life of the woman? You know, when do we invite them to that process? It's, you know, totally up to them. The victim-centered approach that Johnny mentioned this morning is very much our approach. They're involved in their care. They're leading their process. And so what does prosecution look like? Inviting that in. And then post-program aftercare. So 2 years, I don't know what you guys have gone through, but I've had mess in my life. And 2 years didn't seem like enough, and my mess was not as messy as what these women's will be. So what happens with them once our 2-year program is finished? Considering what steps you're going to take. So one thing that we're doing is kind of building a network of transitional homes. So it might be a couple who are empty nesters, whose kids are gone or they're retired, and they say, we've got 3 bedrooms just open, you know, let the women come and live at our place while they go and they do interviews and while they get on their feet as a job, or maybe they're going to school and they just need a place so they don't have to pay room and board, because it'd be weird as a survivor to go and be in the dorms with someone, right? I mean, can you imagine having a survivor on your floor? And I mean, that might sound exciting, but it also might be really strange for the woman. And who knows if this woman is 30, that'd be even, you know, we don't want to put her in a dorm. So what is board, where's she going to live? Who is going to be a network? Because a safety net and a relationship is really important in next steps. And so considering what that post-program looks like, strategizing, networking, planning for that ahead of time is important. So there we go. These are pictures of Eden's Glory. We have about 5 more minutes, I think, for questions, dialogue. But this is the home. The bottom and top picture there are pictures of a corner of one of the women's rooms, of 2 of the women's rooms, and then the middle picture is our living room. And they're not great through the screen to see, but you can just see that we have, it's not just a home, but it's beautiful, it's relaxing, it's modern, it's not institutionalized, you know, where we just want it to feel comfortable. When we walk in there, as we've done all this work, we've prayed, and so like the Lord's Spirit is totally there. Before we painted any wall, we wrote prayers and scriptures and things on the wall, and so it's just saturated with the Lord's Spirit already. Truly incredible. And I don't know what that dinging is. I'm sorry. So but that's just a picture of the home. We've tried really hard to make it a place that'll be loving, warm, and comfortable. We visited a couple of aftercare programs that were white and sterile and just cold, and we worked real hard to let that be different with our home. So, any questions, thoughts? We got 3 or 4 minutes still. Like I said, this has been our journey. Go ahead. Absolutely. We really feel the community has said, yes, this is something that we're ready for. You know, there's still pockets of people who don't fully understand, but we think that's okay, because we've done the hard work of building relationships with the people who matter, you know. But yeah, I think so.
So, like, the neighborhood doesn't know, you know, what's going to be in there.
Actually, we did, so we're out in the country, and so your neighbors are relative, but for the houses that we could see from the property, we went to them and we said, we want to be good neighbors, so we're here in the neighborhood and this is who we are, this is what we're going to do, and we appreciate your help in maintaining the privacy. Do you have any questions? How can we answer your fears? Because we did that with all the neighbors that we could see, and one of the neighbors still didn't understand and still didn't ask us questions. And that same night that we did that, they called the sheriff's department. And they said, "Who are these people? What's going on over there?" And it just it's just part of the challenge and part of the process. But we wanted to do it early. We didn't want women to show up and then that to happen, you know, because a sheriff showing up at the house where there's a brand new resident, like, that would be so scary, right? So scary. So we wanted to do that kind of thing early. And we're still working through that. But, you know, we went and we talked to the sheriff's department. We said, "This is who we are." And they said, "Awesome, if you need anything. And I'll keep an eye on the house." And just wide open doors from, again, the people who matter. I mean, this neighbor he'll come around. So I think once he can understand and we can really answer his questions and alleviate fears, people come around. Mm-hmm. The big reason behind that is the funding. So can we, you know, is it responsible to bring people in when we only have 1 month of sustainability? Well, no, because then we barely have rapport and then we have to refer out. So we're committed to having 6 months of our budget in the bank. And with that kind of money coming in, that means that money will continue to come in. So we've got that established support and investors. And so, yeah, I think that is the reason, because everything else is pretty well ready. Just got a few more work projects to do, but funding's just a challenge.
Cost to flip a home, renovate,
Mm-hmm.
we have volunteer electricians,
Yeah. Well, the home is owned by a couple who got behind the vision. And they said, "We get what you're doing. We've talked for a long time about buying a home in the area to retire in. We're 10 years out of retirement. We live upstate, but we invite you to occupy the home." So before they even bought a home, that's what they told us. And then they said, "What do you need in a home?" And we said, "Well, here's our dream." And so they said, "Great, here's our parameters. Go look for a house." So we kind of got to pick out our house, which is just a really amazing story. So currently they gave us a year free of rent, which will be up here sometime early spring, and then we'll start paying. But it's really low, much lower than I thought they would ask. So there's that. And it's just been a beautiful relationship. Like, they're fully behind it. They totally get it. Renovations, I don't know exactly what it's cost, but it's been much cheaper than I expected.
did they fund that then?
They did not. They
Did you raise the money?
most of that's come from scarves, and most of that has come. Well, I shouldn't think most of it's come from scarves, but a lot of it has come from also just people hearing about it. You know, here's $20, or the scarf is $7. I'm going to give you 20. Like, well, do you want to take 2? Because you can take 2. And they're like, "No, that's good." So just donations here and there. We've done some other fundraisers. Stocking the house, we did that through having a housewarming shower for the whole